Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Build and Scale Boldly podcast, the podcast for purpose driven female entrepreneurs who want to grow their businesses with more profit, more ease, and more impact. I'm your host, Leti Alto. I'm a physician, entrepreneur, and real estate investor. And today we're going to be talking about how to be an exceptional partner and build partnerships that last. Now, this topic came out of a recent retreat that I held for the Wing Mastermind. And one of the questions that came from one of the members of the mastermind is, how do I partner? And is there any content somewhere or books that I should be reading on how to do partnerships successfully? And unfortunately, I've really never found that information, but I've had so much experience with partnerships myself in business. And and I've also really done a lot of training on how to make your marriage work, which is really similar to what you need to do to have a successful partnership. And so I've kind of combined all of that in today's episode to be able to really help you have a guide to how to be an exceptional partner yourself and then build these partnerships that last. Now, partnerships can be one of those ways to really grow your business and go further, faster, and accomplish more together with another person than you could ever do alone. But when they don't go well, they can create frustration, conflict, even stall your momentum. And I've been part of those types of partnerships as well. And whether you have this kind of messy, uncomfortable partnership without clear roles, or you have a partnership that's built on trust that really helps you become 1 + 1 = 3, then it really depends on you. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today is you and how you become that exceptional partner. Because as much as you may tend to think that a partnership is about two people and that both people hold responsibility, ultimately you really only control you. And so having a successful partnership is about you. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And we're going to go and cover topics from how do you claim the identity of an exceptional partner, owning your part, knowing your why, and how do you ultimately build this partnership that compounds your strengths instead of draining your energy. And if you've ever wondered, why do some partnerships thrive? Why do some fall apart? Then you're not alone. And that's part of what I really want to make sure that you walk away with today from this podcast is understanding what you can do to really have a successful partnership. So with that, let's talk about how you become a great partner. And remember, the emphasis here is on you because you ultimately control yourself and you control the actions that you take. You can only influence the other person or other people that you're in partnership with, which is important. And we can focus on that another time. But I want to really talk about you and how you become that exceptional partner. So step number 1 of being an exceptional partner is claiming the identity of an exceptional partner. So this means that you say to yourself, hey, I'm going to turn this into a really successful situation for me and for my partner. And you kind of claim the identity of like, I'm going to learn to be an exceptional partner. I'm to put in the work to become an exceptional partner and put in the day-to-day effort to be that exceptional partner. Some of the relationship training I've done for relationships in marriage, actually, the training is, the only thing that you control in a partnership is choice. And people tend to think, oh, choice is about the choice of your partner, but it's actually the choice of yourself and the choice of who you bring to that partnership and who you show up as a partner day to day. Because partnerships can start with this grand idea and you can be in your best behavior initially in the partnership, but then day to day as challenges arise, as maybe there's some resistance and friction in the partnership, you can bring a different version of yourself. And why I've made so many ties so far in this podcast to your marriage is because marriages can be the similar way. When you're dating, you're on your best behavior, you are the best version of you. And then 5 years in, when you're starting to take your partner for granted, or those little things that you used to think were cute or annoying you, you don't bring that best version of yourself. You don't choose your state in a way that really facilitates that partnership. So this is really an important step is initially taking that time to say, I'm going to claim the identity of being an exceptional partner. That's the vision I have for this partnership. Making that commitment to yourself and to your partner and putting in the time and energy and effort to listen to podcasts like this, right, where you can learn to be a great partner. And I'm going to give you some resources towards the end of this podcast as well of books that can help you think about how to be a great partner. Number 2 is to identify why you're doing this partnership. Now, the why is so important. Every time I do a podcast, I'm talking about your why. Why? Because it's the purpose. It's why you do what you do. And if you have a very clear why for why you're doing this partnership, it's going to be what you can come back to down the road when there's stress in the partnership, there's some friction in the partnership. You can say, hey, I remember why we're doing this. I remember that vision of what I wanted to be in this partnership and why it was so important to me to do this partnership in the first place. And then you can kind of catch yourself and you can come back to bringing the best version of yourself. And so, why is it important for you to participate in this partnership? Spend some time thinking about this before you go into a partnership. And, what is the most important thing for you in this partnership to bring to this partnership, to be in this partnership? How is this partnership going to help you? How's it going to help your family? How's it going to help your business? Spend some time thinking about the why. You might even consider writing this down so you have that clarity of vision. There's just something special about writing things down. And then also so you can come back to it down the road. The next one is to take 100% responsibility for this partnership. So if things are challenging, you step up and you say, hey, I'm going to be the leader in this partnership. I'm going to be the person who turns this around. And so it's taking responsibility of the partnership, not sitting back and saying, oh, let me play this blame game when things get difficult. And so if you take that 100% responsibility in the very first step of the partnership, it's going to lead you to show up differently down the road and to take a different level of responsibility if things start to go poorly in that partnership, because you're ultimately the person that can change the trajectory of it and turn it around. Now, one of the important parts of taking 100% responsibility is to understand that things may not always be fair. When I talk to my kids, one of the things I talk to them about is there's this guy, David Rico, that has something called the 5 givens, and they're the 5 givens of life. And one of those is life is not always fair and just, right? And it's such a helpful way to think about it, because I think a lot of us get into this fairness game, especially with partnerships, like, hey, I said I was going to do this, I did it. They said they were going to do this, they didn't do it. It's not fair. They're not holding up their side, or I'm doing a lot more work than they said that they were going to do. And, what we're going to talk about a little bit later is even in the contract, ideally you lay out some of these responsibilities and roles. But what if you find that your partner is not carrying that weight? They're not actually delivering on those responsibilities and roles. And it is, quote unquote, not fair. This is when you remember you're taking 100% responsibility for this partnership. You chose to be in this partnership. You chose this individual in the partnership. Ultimately, you can influence them. You can try to influence them to do what they said they were going to do, but you ultimately have no control over them. The only person you can control is yourself. So when you take that 100% responsibility for the partnership, you realize even when things may not be fair, that that's not serving you to think about it that way. You have to move forward in a really great state, step up and lead. And that may mean that you carry the bulk of the work. That may mean that you actually do all the work. But ultimately, this partnership is there for a reason. There's a why of that partnership, right? And it's probably a purpose greater than yourself. Maybe it's a partnership in real estate, and your why is that you've raised money for a big project and you want to be able to make a property worth a lot more and deliver to your investors. Well, that why is much larger than yourself. It involves investors. You want to make sure that you deliver and you take that 100% responsibility for the project. Even if your partner doesn't show up, don't spend your energy worrying about them. Say, I take responsibility. I'm going to be the leader, and, move forward thinking that, or knowing that this is really going to serve you in some way. You're going to learn some leadership strategy that you wouldn't have had to learn if the situation was different. So ultimately, everything that happens in life is serving you. At least that's my belief, is it's always life happening for me. And so I'm going to step up. I'm going to take 100% responsibility. I'm going to do it even though it's quote unquote not fair. And I'm going to make this a success because it's more about just me and my ego and my partner's ego. There are other people involved. And if you run a business and you have a partner, that's the same thing, right? Your employees rely on your business. Your customers rely on your business to deliver a service they really need. Pick yourself up. Be the bigger person and take that 100% responsibility to deliver on what you said you were going to deliver on. Even if your partner doesn't live up to their expectations, you take control and you do what you need to do to make things right. And then also, I want you to remember one more thing that I've noticed, and I was so guilty of this very early on with a lot of my partnerships, is we tend to overvalue what we contribute and we tend to undervalue what other people contribute. And so what you see is the day-to-day work that you're doing in a partnership, and you tend to say, oh, I'm doing all this work, right? you don't see the day-to-day work that the other individual is doing. And so it's very natural for us to minimize what other people are doing in a partnership. And that can lead to these thoughts of like, hey, it's unfair. This person's not living up to their expectations. And the fact is that this is a human nature pattern that I've seen happen so many times that you have to remember that you're probably overvaluing what you're doing and undervaluing what your partner is doing. And then finally, trade expectations for appreciation. When your partner does do things, appreciate it, right? And try not to live with those expectations. It's a really challenging thing to do, especially have your contract that kind of lays out expectations and your partner's not delivering on the outcomes that they said they were going to deliver on. But those expectations and remembering that and focusing on that and spending your time upset about that is not going to help anybody. It's going to drain your energy. It's going to create friction in the relationship. It's going to have negative impact on the other people involved. So this is, again, training directly out of marriage work that I've done is trade expectations for appreciation. Look for ways that they are adding value that maybe you haven't appreciated. Remember you're overvaluing what you're doing, and just remember that being in a negative state, and remember that being, only focusing on what's missing is not going to make you a great partner. It's not going to make you deliver on what you said you were going to. And so it's really important to manage yourself and say, hey, I'm taking 100% responsibility. I'm going to fix this situation. I'm going to step up. I'm going to do the work that needs to be done to make it right for my other people involved in, beyond me and my partner. The next part is when you do partner with somebody and you're choosing your partner, it's really important to be independently confident in what you're doing in the partnership. So, and this allows for interdependence rather than anybody relying on the other person for anything to be done. So let me give you an example, because I know that maybe wasn't initially as clear as I would have liked it to come out. A lot of people go into partnerships and they don't feel fully whole. They don't fully understand what they're doing, and they're partnering with somebody who they believe is going to make up for their lack. So they're coming into the partnership feeling lack, and they're looking for somebody to have a skill set that makes up for their lack. A strong partnership really can be when two individuals who are whole in themselves, who have the confidence and have experience and have the skill set and have those relationships come together. That's when it's not half plus half tries to equal a whole, but rather 1 + 1 = 3, and you become something greater than yourselves. Now, this isn't to say that each partner is not going to have specific skill sets that are stronger than the other partner, or that each partner is not going to have, maybe one has a lot more relationships than another that are useful in this case. It's not to say that things are going to be completely equal, but it's to say that you don't need to be in a partnership. You're choosing to be in a partnership. So when you come with that strength of, hey, I'm choosing to be here because I see together we become something greater, rather than I'm coming here because I lack something and I'm trying to make up for it, I really believe those are what make the strongest types of partnerships, and what also actually makes things really, protects the downside. Because if your partner does have something happen, like God forbid something happens in their life and they become sick, or somebody in their family becomes sick and they're gone, which has happened to me a number of times in partnerships. It's not even something they were controlling. Something happened and they were largely gone. If you are a whole into yourself, you can carry the weight of that partnership. You can carry the weight of what you're doing. And because you're not reliant and you didn't come in from lack trying to make up for something with that partnership. So I really encourage you to be independently confident and competent in whatever you're doing in that partnership, and look for situations where 1 + 1, two fully whole individuals allow for interdependence, where things become more, versus coming in looking for somebody out of scarcity. And then finally, have a great contract. I really believe contracts protect you, and they are great for a partnership to have that. I've seen so many partnerships go bad because people just had handshakes, or they had understanding. They made assumptions about what the other person was going to do or what their role was going to be. And when those things go bad, it can be really awful. It can be awkward. When business is split and people are calling different customers and trying to get them to move with them. Oh gosh, that's terrible for the customers too. So when you're building a great contract, I would really encourage you to have those hard discussions right up front. What happens if one of us gets sick? What happens if one of us dies? What kind of roles are we each going to have? What are the outcomes we're going to deliver What are our responsibilities? And outline that in that contract. Outline kind of these cases and what are you going to do when something happens? And, you don't want to assume that everything's going to be smooth sailing because it's usually not, right? This is life. Life happens, things happen. Things are not always smooth sailing. So set it up ahead of time so that you have talked through some of the possibilities of what could go wrong and have contingency plans in place in the contract, especially contingency plans for exit. So if something happens and you need to split ways, what's going to happen? How is exit going to happen? I think that's really, really important to lay out right in the very beginning. And it will actually preserve the relationship and allow you to move through any of those challenges if you do actually need to split up and go separate ways. If you've talked about it initially in the very beginning, then it's just part of like, hey, we talked about this. This is not working for me. Let's talk about how we can actually just implement what we've already talked about. Such a different conversation than if you have no contract. There's emotions involved. There are assumptions about what each person was going to do and they didn't do it. And now you've destroyed a relationship as well as destroyed the business itself. It's just not a really great outcome at all. And so why not avoid that by getting a great contract? A little bit more work, a little bit more cost with legal fees, but totally worth it because things will happen over the course of your partnership and you want to have outlined some of those decision making needs to be done when there's disagreements or when you need to exit or you need to dissolve that partnership. Another point I wanted to deliver, which is a little bit not as broad as the other ones, but it's a lesson that I learned more recently. And I think it's important to say is understand the finances of your partners and the background of your partners before you go into a partnership. I have made the mistake in the past of going in more blindly with a partnership and assuming that the partner was going to be able to meet their financial obligations of the partnership, and they weren't. And, one way you can mitigate against this is, again, you could put that into the contract, right? So, for example, in a property, let's say you're in a partnership where you own a property with somebody else, if there's a need for a big repair that suddenly happens and you don't have a cash in the bank for the partnership, what's going to happen for each individual? And what if one individual doesn't have the money available? What's going to happen with their part of the money if they can't produce it? And so, for example, one of the things we've built into previous partnerships in terms of properties is if there's a need for a large capital infusion, one partner has the money and the other partner doesn't, that one partner can choose to borrow the money and it's at a very high interest rate, again, outlined in the contract, so that that partner knows, hey, this is what happens if we're in that situation. Or they could, of course, go get alternative funding to be able to produce at a lower interest rate. So, but that way it's so clear and you're not in a situation where one partner's like, oh, I have the money. The other partner's like, I don't. And that one partner now has to pony up all the money and there's no clarity in the contract of what needs to be done. So really understanding your partner's financial situation and setting up those contingencies in the contract for what happens if there needs to be money infused into the business is another really important one that I wanted to highlight with this. Now, what are some resources available to you? Well, I think if you're doing any sort of marital counseling or all those pieces, I think that's a really great resource to apply to partnerships because it truly is like a marriage, right? You're getting into a relationship with somebody long term where you're going to interact with them very, very frequently and you're going to build something together. It's the same as a marriage. So you really want to be very, very thoughtful about which partnerships you get into and then again, how you show up in that partnership. So I think any sort of marriage counseling, anything you can read about interactions with your spouse, really great content. The other thing I wanted to bring up is there's a book called Crucial Conversations and also Crucial Accountability by Patterson et al. And that is a great series of 2 books that really help having these conversations that you really should be having before you even enter into partnership. But once you're in the partnership, it can help you have some tools to navigate through those conversations that can be difficult or challenging and to really seek to understand and to get the other person's side and be able to communicate things in a way that reduce the emotions so that it doesn't become emotionally charged. The next one is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. A real classic, but in there, one of the things that it says, it's always stuck with me, is seek to understand first. Because so many of us go into conversations with assumptions about what the other person's thinking or doing or how they've been acting. And that just really helps you to have more of a neutrality when you go into those conversations. And of course, if you're taking 100% responsibility and you're stepping up and you're managing your mind and you've done this at work of saying, hey, I'm going to be an exceptional partner. I'm going to, go in with grace. I'm going to go in with compassion. I'm going to go in with to seek to understand my, individual's partner's situation and be in their shoes. You may not need this book, but I think it's a really great classic that can be of use to you as you go through this work of learning to be an exceptional partner. I also have a books download that are my favorite books, and there are all kinds of business books in there that I think are really helpful, and also a lot of mindset books. And this is largely about managing your own mind and remembering that the stories you tell are under your control, and the stories you choose to tell and the meaning you choose to give to things that your partner does is under your control. So you can choose any meaning, you can choose any thought. So I think mindset books are really, really helpful because they help you remember how much control you have over the stories you tell and ultimately then the actions and the feelings that you have. So if you want to look at my Biara favorite books download, it'll probably give you some resources that are also very helpful for you down below in the show notes so you can get access to my must-read business books for female entrepreneurs. And again, there's a lot of mindset books in there as well. So if this episode gave you clarity, inspiration, and understanding how to be an exceptional partner and how to create successful partnerships, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what's next in the podcast. And if you know another bold woman entrepreneur who needs this message, who needs to hear some of the things we talk about on the Build and Scale Boldly podcast, send her this episode. Let's normalize growth. Let's normalize ease in our businesses. Keep dreaming big and keep leading boldly. We'll see you next time.